You really can't age into middle age and be active and fit and not at some point come around to peptides. They actually are healing metabolic pathways, which in my opinion, the crux of most modern diseases is metabolic dysfunction. I wasn't trying to defend Ozempic for weight loss, but I think at the end of the day, there is nuance. Most hormonal issues are lifestyle in nature. Like we burn out our thyroids, we burn out our hormones when we're younger. You are tuned into the Dr. Tina Show.
And you also have some really interesting take on GLP1s, or as many people know it as, Ozempic. And so what is your take on this drug or series of drugs? Are they bad? Are they good?
So they're peptides. And when I realized that they were peptides, I immediately got more intrigued because a peptide is just a string of amino acids. And you were saying your husband likes peptides. A lot of people you really can't age into middle age and be active and fit and not at some point come around to peptides because you end up in pain and you end up with injuries, right?
Yeah.
And so the peptide community is really expanding. I think we're finding ease of execution with a lot of these oral forms of different peptides, BPC-157, TB-500, these, Wolverine peptides. There's all kinds of different peptides out there. And peptides by nature insert themselves, they're just strings of amino acids that are peptide bound together to make peptides. And then strings of peptides are just proteins. That's the complexity of it. That's where it gets. And so peptides insert themselves where they need to go and they do their magic. It just so happens that these peptides are over here in the big pharma bucket. I think it's because of the way that they are administered, injection wise. And so I started researching them because it was, when was it? A couple summers ago. And there was just spring, summer. It was everywhere I looked. There was so much hype about it. And the weirdest part was the entire functional medicine community was all sounding very propagandized. Like in 2020, immediately my ears perked up and I'm like, this sounds like propaganda. Mm-hmm. And indeed, here we are. So it was the same kind of thing. This clickbaity nonsense I was seeing mainstream media. And then I was hearing the functional medicine and the medical freedom community also preaching the same message. Like, when do those two align?
Yeah.
That was weird. So immediately I was like, this smells sus. So I start looking into it and I find stacks of data showing from tip to toe really amazing regenerative healing and anti-inflammatory properties, really potent anti-inflammatory properties to these peptides. They're not just working by decreasing your, stomach motility. They're not just making you feel fuller longer. They're not just shutting down your appetite in your brain. They're not, that's not where it ends. They actually are healing metabolic pathways, which in my opinion, the crux of most modern diseases is metabolic dysfunction. And we are all, to some degree, I mean, if 94% of US adults are metabolically compromised, then that's 94% of your listeners. Yeah. Maybe yours are a bit better because, maybe our listeners of our pods are more educated, but generally speaking. And so I don't know what, I think part of it was just me being, I tried to make a podcast about it and come out and talk about it. And the pushback I got was so fierce and ferocious. And it was very reminiscent of 2020 when I was telling people to eat meat, go outside, lift weights. You don't need to be a sitting duck. Mm-hmm. Like viruses there's a high success rate of getting through all of these things if you go into it with good metabolic health and you start taking, and even small steps today will translate into more potent and, robust immune response. And it was very much like that. And I was like, this is weird. Even the bots, I was getting the same kind of bot. You've probably gotten a lot of bot messages. You know them when you see them, right? And you go look at the profile and you're like, this is a bot. So I'm getting this parroted response. Just eat less and move more. Just eat less and move more. And I'm like, no, I didn't mention weight loss. I was talking about Parkinson's. No, I didn't mention weight loss. I was sharing a study about this. And they just kept coming in. The functional medicine community got pissed at me. I went on Dr. Mark Hyman's podcast to debate Callie Means. He wouldn't listen. He was yelling over the top of me. It was very, very polarized of a topic. And I was like, what have I stumbled into here? And I'm so insubordinate. I just kept pushing. The more they push back on me, the more I'm just like that. I'm like, oh, you want to go? I'll go. Okay. So, and I will go my favorite game is just obliterating people with data. So I'm like, oh, I got mountains over here and I can quote them. And I don't mean to be, that's not,
no, I love this.
That's probably my pathology.
Yes, yes let's go.
But it's like, all right, let's go. And the more I pushed forward, I got a lot of heat, but I started getting people listening, and then I started, I've got a decent, I don't have a following your size, but I have a decent size following. And
Yeah.
I started getting hundreds and now thousands of messages from people saying, thank you so much. These peptides have changed my life completely. And I have been living in so much shame. I can't talk about it with my family. Um, People who really did need it for type 2 diabetes, metabolic dysfunction, weight loss, which was not the conversation I was trying to have. I was trying to share out the neuroregenerative, the cardiovascular, all of the other benefits in the different organ systems that I was seeing, but everybody wanted to talk about weight loss. And these folks were messaging me saying, I was terrified. So-and-so terrified me. So-and-so influencer terrified me. The media terrified me. My doctor's been trying to get me to go on it. I finally did. And oh my gosh, my life has changed. And oh my gosh, I'm fertile now. And oh my
Wow.
gosh, my depression is gone. And oh my gosh, all my pain is gone. And oh my gosh, this one woman messaged me, this wonderful message, older woman who had her metabolic health completely obliterated by chemotherapy treatment and cancer treatment. And she's in her 60s. And the weight gain was putting her at higher risk for the cancer coming back, right?
Mhm.
Because obesity is a standalone risk factor for multiple types of cancer.
Yep.
And she said, you keep going. Like, this was early on. She's like, you keep going because I went on these and here's my story. And so, one woman messages me and says, finally could go on rides at Disneyland with my kids. And so I wasn't trying to be the weight loss warrior for GLP-1s. I wasn't trying to defend Ozempic for weight
Yeah.
loss, but it's turned into that on a lot of these podcasts because some of these hosts really that's the conversation they want to have. But I think at the end of the day, there is nuance. Oh, and the best part, the part that really got me intrigued, besides the neuroregenerative and anti-inflammatory impacts on the brain and its impacts on pain and its impacts on our immune system and the protective, when I started talking about the data that I found from 2021 on the protective mechanism of semaglutide against COVID, I got deplatformed at 232,000 off Instagram. And there's data that came out last year showing it's correlative, it's not causative, but showing potential protective benefit against cancer. This is all data that's published, and things got a little heated at that point. I think I got in the crosshairs of big pharma. I don't know, but all of this to say, I think there's extreme potential for alcohol abuse syndrome, addiction, anything that's going off that dopamine dragon, as I call it. Those dopaminergic pathways are impacted, and we've now got all the data to support everything I was either had found or was speculating or had only had animal data on. We now have human data on most of it. And I just think there's a place for them. And I think
Yeah.
that they need to be done appropriately like any other peptide. And I don't think it's a monotherapy, like take high doses, good luck. I think obviously lifestyle is always number one. And I've been preaching metabolic health since day one. So I don't know how that message has gotten skewed. I'm not a big pharma shill. I may go to the fucking gym and eat enough protein and get your shit together person. And then we have tools.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use all the tools that I want to use that I have accessible to me, and I can prescribe in Oregon. So I'm going to use my prescription abilities. We have no problem. I was thinking about it in the shower this morning. Like, somebody in the Maha movement was saying something about how they prefer food over big pharma. And I was like, this is really choice coming from, I'm not bashing the Maha movement. It's a generalized statement I'm making. It's really choice to me that people are okay with having their, thyroid hormone compounded or their hormone replacement, or because I could make an argument that most hormonal issues, aside from ovarian failure at menopause, most hormonal issues are lifestyle in nature. Like, we burn out our thyroids, we burn out our hormones and when we're younger. And I could also make an argument that folks need for high blood pressure medication and statins are also lifestyle. I could make those arguments all day, but we don't vilify those people.
Yeah.
And then my best part was last night, I see a huge influencer who has been bashing on a doctor who's been bashing on GLP-1s and Ozempic for a year on every podcast he could get on himself on. And then he does a freaking reel on the benefits of BPC 157 because you can buy it in a pill and he can sell it to you.
Oh, I saw that one actually.
And I'm like, really? I
Yeah.
commented on it. I'm like, that's interesting. Because I know of a peptide that you've been bashing on that's also anti-inflammatory, healing, and regenerative. But
Yeah.
that one's not okay. It doesn't fit the storyline.
Well, I think that's the interesting part. It's like, when we become these like mono thinking individuals where label ourselves anything, whether it's Maha or whether it's Pharma or whether and we cannot deviate from our cultural group, I think we get into a big problem.
It's
And so
huge.
I never really trust someone who hasn't pushed back against not only the other side, but their side, because you have to be willing to do both in order to have like a reasonable, rational debate. Now, when you got deplatformed, why do you think that happened? Like,
Well, that was the month that Eli Lilly released their vials. So they had Zepbound is the brand name for so we've got semaglutide, which is made by Novo Nordisk, and semaglutide comes in Ozempic or Wegovy.
yeah,
Ozempic is FDA approved for type 2. Wegovy is approved for weight loss. On the Eli Lilly side, we have Mounjaro, and that would be Mounjaro is for type 2 FDA approved, and Zepbound is their version. Same thing, same peptides. They're just, well, these two are different, but you get what I'm saying.
yeah.
They're just approved for different things. They came out with their vials that month, actually that week, I think. And they had sent a lot of cease and desist letters to the telemedicine companies, the compounding pharmacists, the many doctors who were prescribing compounded. They really have, and Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly have been pushing very hard against the compounded. And at that time, I have been proposing microdoses or a more personalized dosing strategy, I think would be a better term. And meaning that the starting dose, even if you're dealing with type 2 diabetes or obesity and that's what you're using it for, I think the starting dose in many cases can be too high and non-tolerable to many people. And so if you do want to escalate somebody up to those therapeutic doses, then consider, big pharma, consider a lower dose. People shouldn't have to lay on the couch for a month vomiting profusely
Exactly.
to onboard a medication or a peptide, right? But on the other side, I was talking about using very potentially, like for someone like yourself, who's metabolically very optimized, you lift weights, you do all the things, right? You get your sleep, you get your protein in, you do all the things. If you were coming to me saying, I've got this neurologic issue, or I've got any number of things, PCOS, fertility issues, we are allowed to use things off label. And so in those cases, my husband has high blood pressure and he's got cardiovascular disease in his family. So in those cases, we would use these peptides potentially preventatively or in very minuscule doses because you would not tolerate usually anywhere near the standard starting dose. And anyway, all that to say, that week, everybody was getting letters and I got deplatformed. So I speculate. I do not know. I don't have any proof, but I speculate I kind of got caught up in the crosshairs there, I think.
Yeah.
Because I did have a girlfriend who has a decent size account who comes out and says she tells you how to dose, where to get it, not even prescription. Like she's making claims that I think were way riskier than anything I would ever say publicly or even on the internet for that matter. And she got suspended that week as well, her account. And when she was allowed to appeal, I was not. And when she appealed, she was allowed to find out who reported her, and it was Eli Lilly. And it was the day after my account went down.
I didn't know you could do that.
Well, they didn't give me any option. I was just gone.
Interesting. I got a guy next time if anything happens to you.
I literally asked everyone I knew. I'm like, somebody has to know someone at Meta. You know who I think knew someone at Meta? I think it might have been Jen Cohen. I don't know if you know Jen Cohen, but she's a cool chick too.
Yeah.
And I owe her a lot, I think. Anyway, that was all crazy. It's crazy.
So basically, to understand, they don't want you recommending these non-prescription. It's like a white label versus their Eli Lilly label. And so they're basically saying you can't do this other thing over here that's not ours.
I don't think they want compounding pharmacies. And I never really was. It's like however you can access it. In fact, there's a paper that came out
because compounding pharmacies don't use Eli Lilly's formula, so they don't have to pay them licensing.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, that's correct.
And so because if I understand this correct, like what do they have that is patented in this? Like what are compounders not allowed to use or allowed to use?
I don't know all the details. I know that there's 503A and 503B in the compounding world. And I'm not a compounding pharmacist, so I'm not an expert in this, but there is a clause that came into being in the early 2000s or 2000s and teens. Yeah, it was like 2013, I think. It was when I was in practice, that compounding pharmacists could fill the need on a shortage.
Interesting.
And that's a 503B. And I don't know if those are more identical to the brand name or not, but these two peptides have been in shortage for a long time. And so 503B compounding pharmacies were filling that need. And now there's a big lawsuits going on because supposedly they're out of shortage, and it's a whole thing. I don't pretend to follow it all completely, or understand it all. But now it's going to go back to 503A, which is less. There's less oversight on 503A. So them pushing against this compounding, it might be pushing it into even a less, you know, I don't want to say
Regulated?
less safe.
Yeah.
That's not the right word, but there's going to be even less oversight on how these are manufactured in different pharmacies than they were before. So I don't know. I'm trying to stay out of the whole mess. I was really excited this last month, in March actually. An article came out in the Journal of Diabetes showing that you could actually take the pens, because this is the big thing. The brand names are in pens and they're pre-filled, they're pre-dosed.
Oh, so you can't change the dose.
Yes, that's the problem. I should have said that early on. The compounding come in vials and you can pull up what you want. So you can
Yeah.
have a more personalized approach. So the pens, though, this paper was published and they were talking about using it in smaller doses. They called, it's like microdosing has made it mainstream, and I'm nowhere in the conversation, but that's okay. I'm not talking about it for weight loss. I'm trying to talk about it for other things. But they came out with this paper showing microdosing for type 2 diabetes. You can start people at a lower dose, and you can actually use this pen click method with the brand name pens. So that should make Big Pharma happy because their product is still being used.
Yep.
But depending on and they have a whole chart in the study. Anyone can go look it up. I can give you the link to put in the show notes. There's a whole chart on how to use the pen click method to get the appropriate dosage if somebody can't tolerate the dose or if somebody needs something more personalized.
Yeah, which is brilliant because I have some friends that, by all intents and practices, they probably did need help from some sort of GLP-1.
I totally agree with them. Microdosing was never intended to be a weight loss strategy. And in fact, I'll tell you the truth, it is not an effective weight loss strategy. I have said this from day one. I have been completely clear from day one. If you go back and watch any of my content, if you watch any of the other podcasts that I was on over the past year plus, if you watch my free 4-part